Wedding day. Shock. Little boy reveals bride's lie, sends millionaire dad into a rage. Before we jump in, this story reached people in over 50 countries last week. Let's see how far it goes today. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the ornate ballroom windows of the Grand Monarch Hotel London, illuminating particles of dust that danced in the golden light. Leo Miller sat cross-legged on a plush velvet armchair, his small fingers carefully arranging a collection of vintage toy cars. He and his mother had gathered them years ago at various antique fairs across the city. At 9 years old, Leo possessed a keen sense of observation that sometimes made his father joke he'd make an excellent detective someday. "Leo, son, could you come downstairs? Your Uncle Ben and I have something important to tell you." Leo recognized the unusual excitement in his father's voice. Richard Rick Dawson wasn't typically one for surprises or announcements. Since losing Leo's mother 2 years ago in a sudden illness, their life had fallen into a predictable, if somewhat hollow, routine. He carefully placed his mother's favorite miniature Aston Martin back in its special spot before hopping off the armchair. As he descended the grand staircase leading to the hotel's private lounge, Leo noticed his father pacing below with Uncle Ben. Rick Dawson was a striking figure, tall and confident, the very image of success in his impeccably tailored suit. His investment firm had made him one of London's most eligible bachelors, a fact that seemed to amuse rather than impress him. Uncle Ben, Rick's older brother, a retired mechanic with a gruff exterior but a heart of gold, stood by, his arms crossed, a look of quiet skepticism on his face. "There's my boy," Rick said, his smile stretching wider than Leo had seen in months. Rick gestured to a beautiful woman sitting gracefully on a nearby sofa, her blonde hair shimmering under the chandelier light. She was dressed in an exquisite silk gown, her eyes, the color of a summer sky, sparkling with an almost unnatural vivacity. "Leo, I'd like you to meet Serafina Dubois." Serafina rose with an elegant movement, extending a slender, manicured hand. "It's so lovely to finally meet you, Leo. Your father talks about you constantly." Her voice was like liquid velvet, smooth and captivating. But something in her eyes, a fleeting, almost imperceptible hardness, made Leo uneasy. He'd seen that look before in the eyes of his classmates when they tried to hide something. Rick's eyes beamed as he put a hand on Leo's shoulder. "Serafina and I have something wonderful to tell you, son. We're getting married. This Saturday, right here at the Grand Monarch." A tight knot formed in Leo's stomach. Married? It felt too soon, too sudden. His father, usually so meticulous and cautious, had been swept up in a whirlwind romance over the past 6 months. Serafina seemed to possess an uncanny ability to anticipate Rick's every desire, charming him with tales of her aristocratic French family, her supposed passion for philanthropy, and her refined tastes. She'd moved into the hotel suite across from theirs just a month ago, citing renovations at her own unseen estate. Uncle Ben cleared his throat. "It's all happening rather quickly, isn't it, Rick?" His tone was mild, but his eyes, fixed on Serafina, held a hint of suspicion. Serafina laughed, a tinkling, melodic sound. "Love often moves quickly, dear Ben. When it's right, why delay?" "Indeed," Rick agreed, oblivious to the subtle tension. "Serafina has brought so much joy back into our lives. Leo, I want us to be a family again." Leo forced a small smile, but the knot tightened. Maria, their long-standing household manager, a woman whose wisdom was as deep as her loyalty, had also expressed her quiet reservations. "Something about her, Leo," she'd whispered in Spanish one evening. "Too perfect, like a painting that hasn't quite dried." That night, sleep eluded Leo. He lay in bed, listening to the muffled sounds of the hotel. He remembered his mother's laugh, the way she used to tell him to trust his instincts. "Your gut knows things before your head does, my lion," she'd say. And his gut was screaming. Over the next few days, the Grand Monarch buzzed with wedding preparations. Serafina was everywhere, directing florists, tasting cakes, her laughter echoing through the opulent halls. But Leo noticed things, small, unsettling details. He'd seen her once in a deserted hallway, speaking intensely on a burner phone, her voice low and sharp. The timeline hasn't changed, Damon. Just after the ceremony. No, during the reception. He'd also seen her slip a small, worn photograph from her purse once. It showed a different woman, younger, with hair the color of midnight, standing next to a stern-looking man. Serafina had quickly hidden it when she saw Leo, her smile faltering for a split second. And then there were the financial documents. Rick had recently been making large transfers to various shell corporations, investments Serafina had enthusiastically recommended. "Just securing our future, darling," she'd told him. But Leo's mother, an accountant, had taught him about financial transparency. These transfers felt murky. One afternoon, while Serafina was out for a fitting, Leo slipped into her suite. Maria, feigning a need to clean, created a distraction for the hotel staff. Leo found a hidden compartment in her antique vanity table. Inside, tucked beneath layers of silk scarves, was a small, dusty box. His heart pounded as he opened it. The contents sent a chill down his spine. A faded marriage certificate, issued not to Serafina Dubois, but to Alara Vance and Damon Blackwood, dated 5 years prior. There were also old photos of Serafina, as Alara, with a rugged-looking man, clearly Damon, in what appeared to be various stages of financial dealings, smiling with bank officials, signing documents. And then a recent photo. Serafina, in the elegant dress she wore often around Rick, embracing Damon in front of a modest suburban house. It was not her supposed aristocratic estate. "Your father trusts me more." After all, who would believe a jealous child over the woman who brought happiness back into his life? Serafina's words, spoken with a cruel smirk just yesterday when Leo had tried to subtly question her about a discrepancy in her stories, echoed in his mind. A child's whispers are just that, whispers. Against my carefully constructed truth, they fade to nothing. Leo quickly photographed everything with his tablet. He knew he had to get this to his father. But Rick was so enamored, so completely swept up in the fantasy Serafina had woven. He'd dismissed Leo's vague concerns with gentle pats on the head and reassurances. Curiosity, Leo, can be a very dangerous game. Sometimes even the most meticulous plans have unforeseen eliminations. Serafina had said that to him last night, her voice a low, chilling purr after he'd accidentally left his tablet unlocked on a page about forensic accounting. Leo showed the evidence to Uncle Ben and Maria. Uncle Ben's face went from pale to fiery red. "I knew it! That woman's a snake!" Maria, ever pragmatic, immediately called Mr. Harrison, Leo's school counselor, a man known for his calm demeanor and sharp intellect. Mr. Harrison, seeing the gravity of the situation and the undeniable proof, assured them he would contact a trusted private investigator and ensure police were discreetly involved. "We'll need to do this carefully, Leo," he said, his voice firm but reassuring. "Your father needs to see this with his own eyes, without giving her time to destroy anything." The wedding day dawned bright and clear, mocking the storm brewing within Leo. The Grand Monarch Hotel buzzed with excitement. Guests, dressed in their finest, filled the opulent ballroom. Rick, radiant in his tuxedo, stood at the altar, a joyous smile on his face as he awaited his bride. Leo, impeccably dressed in a tiny tuxedo, stood beside him, a weighty envelope hidden in his inner jacket pocket. Serafina glided down the aisle, a vision in white lace, her smile dazzling, her eyes sweeping over the crowd. She looked every inch the perfect, loving bride. As she reached the altar, Rick took her hands, his eyes full of adoration. The Reverend began the ceremony, his voice sonorous and comforting. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Richard Dawson and Serafina Dubois." Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. Now or never. He thought of his mother, of his father's vulnerability, of the family he needed to protect. His small hand trembled as he reached into his pocket. The Reverend continued, "If anyone present knows of any just cause or impediment why these two persons should not be joined together in holy matrimony, let them speak now or else forever hold their peace." Silence. A pregnant, expectant silence. This was his chance. "I do." Leo's voice, small but clear, cut through the reverent hush. Every head in the ballroom whipped towards him. Rick's eyes, wide with shock, turned to his son. Serafina's dazzling smile froze, then slowly morphed into a look of pure, unadulterated fury. "Leo, what on earth?" Rick whispered, his face a mixture of confusion and embarrassment. Serafina's eyes, now devoid of warmth, bore into Leo. The boy is clearly unwell. Perhaps he needs to be taken out. Her voice was low, menacing, a stark contrast to her earlier velvet tone. "He's not unwell." Uncle Ben's voice boomed from the front row, stepping forward. "He's got proof." Leo pulled the photographs and the marriage certificate from the envelope, his hands shaking but his resolve iron strong. "Her name isn't Serafina Dubois, she's Ilara Vance, and she's already married to Damon Blackwood." He held up the marriage certificate, its faded ink visible even from a distance. Then he flashed the photos. Ilara Vance with Damon Blackwood, the two of them seemingly inseparable, engaged in dubious financial transactions. A collective gasp rippled through the stunned crowd. Rick's eyes, still fixed on Serafina, slowly widened in horror. His face, once beaming, now contorted into a mask of disbelief, then a terrible, burning rage. "Is this true, Serafina?" His voice was a low growl, barely recognizable. Serafina's composure shattered. "This is ridiculous." "Lies. The boy is disturbed, Rick. He's always been jealous of me. He probably fabricated these filthy accusations." She lunged for the documents in Leo's hand, her eyes blazing with desperation. But Maria, quick as a flash, stepped between them, shielding Leo and scooping up the papers. "No, ma'am," Maria said, her voice unusually firm. "These are very real. Just..." Then, two plainclothes police officers, discreetly positioned at the back of the ballroom, moved forward, their movements swift and decisive. They were accompanied by a private investigator, Mr. Davies, whom Mr. Harrison had contacted. "Ilara Vance, also known as Serafina Dubois," one officer announced, her voice calm and authoritative. "You are under arrest for bigamy, fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes." Serafina let out a high-pitched shriek, her carefully constructed facade crumbling completely. "This is impossible, Rick, tell them this is a mistake." But Rick's eyes were locked on her, blazing, with a cold, righteous fury. "Get her out of my sight," he seethed, his voice shaking with suppressed violence. "Get her out of my hotel." His entire body trembled, his hands clenching into fists. The rage was raw, visceral, fueled by betrayal. Just as the officers began to lead Serafina away, a commotion erupted at the back of the ballroom. Damon Blackwood, dressed in a simple, dark suit, tried to slip out unnoticed, but Mr. Harrison, who had also arrived, pointed him out to security. "That's her accomplice!" Damon was apprehended quickly. Men of his standing, they see what they want to believe. And dear Rick, he's just another mark waiting for the right performance. Serafina's chilling words, now revealed as the truth, echoed in the stunned silence. The ballroom, moments ago filled with the joyful anticipation of a wedding, now stood as the stage for a spectacular downfall. Rick stood motionless at the altar, watching as the woman he was about to marry, the woman who had promised to fill the void in his heart, was led away in handcuffs. The rage that consumed him was not just for the betrayal of his love, but for the danger she had brought to his son, his family, his entire future. "Your father's trust? It's a key, Leo, a key to his empire, and I hold it now." Serafina had sneered this at Leo just days ago. Now her grip on that key was broken. The hotel staff, discreetly directed by Maria, began to usher the bewildered guests out. Leo walked over to his father, who still stood frozen. He tugged gently on Rick's tuxedo jacket. Rick looked down at his son, the fury in his eyes slowly softening into a profound sadness, then gratitude. He knelt, pulling Leo into a tight hug. "You saved me, son," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us." Curiosity, Leo, can be a very dangerous game. Sometimes even the most meticulous plans have unforeseen eliminations. Serafina's veiled threat, now a distant echo. Leo had faced that danger head-on, and he had won. In the aftermath of the shocking wedding day revelation, the Grand Monarch Hotel became a whirlwind of police investigations and media frenzies. News vans lined the streets, reporters shouting questions every time Rick or Leo left the hotel. Social media buzzed with speculations about the Black Widow of London, a moniker Alara Vance quickly earned, though Rick found it darkly ironic given his own narrow escape. More unsettling than the public scrutiny was the private shame that gnawed at Rick's confidence. How could someone so successful in business, someone who built an empire by reading people in high-stakes situations, have been so completely fooled? He confided to Uncle Ben during a late-night conversation in their hotel suite. I pride myself on understanding human nature. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals, detected corporate espionage, identified dishonest competitors. How could I miss something so obvious? Uncle Ben, who had flown in immediately after hearing the news, poured them both another scotch. Because she was a professional, Rick, this was her career. You were looking for love, not analyzing a business adversary. The psychological impact extended beyond bruised pride. Rick found himself questioning every interaction, every decision, every instinct that once felt reliable. Sleep became elusive as his mind replayed moments with Alara, searching for signs he'd missed, warnings he'd ignored. He had seen what he wanted to believe. Meanwhile, Leo, with the resilience of childhood, adapted to the hotel's new, albeit temporary, normal. But his own trauma surfaced in unexpected ways. He'd checked the suite door locks repeatedly before bed and sometimes woke up screaming from nightmares about the elegant lady returning. She was very angry when they took her away, Leo whispered during one of these midnight episodes, clinging to Rick as he comforted him. What if she gets out and tries to hurt us? These fears were not entirely unfounded. Alara's legal team had requested bail, arguing that their client posed no flight risk. The hearing was scheduled for the following week, and the possibility of her temporary release, however remote, added another layer of anxiety to an already stressful situation. Leo's custody situation also became more complex. Rick's late wife's distant cousin, a seemingly well-meaning but opportunistically inclined relative from Manchester, began calling regularly, expressing a heightened interest in taking Leo in. During their video calls, he seemed pleasant enough, a middle-aged construction worker with no children of his own, but something in his sudden enthusiasm felt opportunistic to Rick. The publicity has been considerable, observed Mr. Harrison, Leo's school counselor, during another meeting. Many people are suddenly taking an interest in Leo's welfare. The implication was clear. Some of that interest might be driven by potential book deals, movie rights, or simply notoriety, rather than genuine concern for a traumatized child. As Rick tucked Leo into bed one night, Leo looked up with those wise, worried eyes. Dad, if the elegant lady gets out, will you still want me even if it's dangerous? The question struck Rick directly in the heart. Was he being selfish by trying to keep Leo close? Would Leo be safer with relatives far from London, away from the media attention and the lingering shadow of Alara's threats? But looking at this brave boy who had risked everything to save his life, Rick knew his answer with absolute certainty. Leo, nothing in this world could make me stop wanting you as part of my family. We'll face whatever comes together. Outside, the rain began to lash against the hotel windows like tiny fists, and somewhere in the distance sirens wailed in the London night. A month after that terrifying wedding day, Damon Blackwood, Alara's accomplice, was released on bail due to a procedural error in his arrest warrant. His legal team had successfully argued that evidence obtained during the initial search was inadmissible, creating enough reasonable doubt to secure his temporary freedom while awaiting trial. The news hit Rick like a physical blow when Detective Inspector Anya Sharma, who had been leading the investigation, called him at 6 a.m. on a stormy Tuesday. We've assigned additional patrol units to your hotel and business premises, she assured Rick, but Damon is legally obligated to stay away from you and Leo. He's wearing an ankle monitor and cannot leave Greater London without permission. Rick knew that legal requirements meant little to desperate criminals. Damon had seen his future unravel because of Leo's testimony. Desperate people did desperate things, a lesson Rick had learned all too well. The hotel security system, already top tier, received immediate upgrades to their suite: motion sensors, reinforced door locks, panic buttons in every room, and 24-hour surveillance. Rick hired private security guards who rotated shifts, ensuring their temporary residence was never unguarded. But Damon proved to be more cunning than anyone had anticipated. The storm that Tuesday night was particularly fierce, with winds strong enough to fell power lines across London. The hotel's backup generators kicked in automatically, but the power surge temporarily disabled several exterior security cameras, a window of opportunity Damon had apparently been waiting for. Rick and Leo woke at 2 a.m. to the faint sound of their security system's intrusion alarm. Rick's phone showed a silent alert indicating movement on the lower level, but the affected cameras only showed static. "Stay close to me," Rick whispered to Leo, who was already trembling beside him. They had practiced this scenario several times, but facing real danger felt entirely different. Moving carefully through the darkened corridor, Rick guided them towards the reinforced panic room he'd had installed within their suite, a secure space with independent communication systems and supplies to last for days if necessary. But when they reached the staircase, they heard the unmistakable sound of someone moving through the suite below. Damon's voice echoed from the main living area, distorted by rage and desperation. "I know you're here, you little brats. You and your rich old man. You ruined everything." Rick's security training kicked in. The panic button in his pocket would call the police immediately, but the response time in this storm could be 15 minutes or more. The safe room was their best option, but getting to it required crossing an exposed area where Damon might see them. "I've got nothing left to lose," Damon screamed, his voice getting closer. "Alara's locked up. My life's ruined, and it's all because one little boy couldn't mind his own damn business." Leo pressed himself against Rick's side, his small body shaking with terror. But when he spoke, his voice sounded surprisingly firm. "Dad, I know another way." During his weeks exploring the hotel suite, Leo had discovered passages and spaces Rick didn't even know existed. Behind a hidden panel in the library upstairs was a narrow maintenance corridor connecting to unused service rooms from the hotel's original construction. "It's super small," he whispered, "but we can hide there until the police get here." Trusting him implicitly, Rick followed Leo through the hidden passage. The space was narrow and dusty, clearly unused for decades, but it was invisible to anyone who didn't know it existed. They could hear Damon moving systematically through the suite, checking rooms, growing increasingly frustrated. A crash sounded somewhere below, likely a vase or a picture frame thrown in anger. "They have to be here," Damon muttered, his voice piercing through the old walls. "The car's in the garage. The security lights are on." The ankle monitor that was supposed to track Damon had apparently not prevented him from reaching their suite. Either he'd found a way to disable it, or the storm was interfering with the signal. For 20 agonizing minutes, they waited in the cramped space as Damon ransacked the suite. Leo remained remarkably calm, his survival instincts honed by months of quiet observation. He showed Rick how to position themselves to avoid floorboard creaks, how to control their breathing to minimize noise. "You're very brave," Rick whispered, marveling at this child who had already survived more trauma than most adults. "Mom always said, scared and brave aren't opposites," Leo replied quietly. "You can be both at once." Finally, they heard sirens approaching through the storm. Red and blue lights flashed through the tiny hidden room's window as police vehicles surrounded the building. Damon's voice turned desperate. "This isn't over! You hear me? This isn't over!" There was a crash, followed by shouting, and then the distinct sound of a struggle. Heavy footsteps moved through the suite, this time accompanied by police radios and authoritative voices. "Upstairs clear," someone shouted. "Suspect in custody." Another voice boomed. When the familiar voice of Detective Inspector Sharma called their names over the suite's intercom system, Rick and Leo finally emerged from their hiding place. They found Damon Blackwood handcuffed in the main foyer, his ankle monitor clearly visible and apparently still functional. "How did he get past the security perimeter?" Rick demanded. Sharma's expression was grim. "He approached from the riverside, taking advantage of the storm surge. He scaled your private dock access during the worst of the weather. We didn't think anyone would be crazy enough to attempt that in these conditions." But Damon had been exactly that crazy. Desperate enough to risk everything for revenge against a 9-year-old boy who had simply tried to save an innocent man's life. As Damon was led away, this time facing additional charges including aggravated trespass, harassment, and violation of bail conditions, he turned back to Leo one last time. "You should have minded your own business, kid," he snarled. "Some secrets are worth killing for." Rick pulled Leo closer, both of them understanding that while this immediate threat was over, the trauma would linger. But they had faced it together, and somehow that changed everything. By morning, Detective Inspector Sharma would tell them Damon's bail had been permanently revoked, and he would likely face federal charges for the ankle monitor violation. The immediate danger had ended, but for now, as the storm winds howled outside and the emergency vehicles departed, Rick and Leo sat together in the library, both grateful to be alive and safe, and both understanding more clearly than ever that they needed each other. 4 months after that terrifying wedding day shock, Leo faced his biggest challenge yet, testifying in court against Alara Vance. Old Bailey, London's Central Criminal Court, loomed like a fortress of Portland stone and glass, its imposing architecture designed to inspire respect for justice. But for a 9-year-old boy, it felt more like a mountain to climb. Rick had spent weeks preparing him for this moment, working with victim advocates and child psychologists to ensure he understood what was about to happen. They had practiced in mock courtrooms, role-played with friendly lawyers, and discussed how telling the truth, even when it was scary, was the most important thing he could do. "Remember, Leo," explained Crown Prosecutor Eleanor Vance during their last prep session, "you just have to say what you saw and heard. Don't worry about anything else. Your dad will be right there in the room, and I'll ask the questions." But knowing what to expect and actually facing it were entirely different experiences. The courtroom was packed with reporters, legal observers, and spectators drawn by the sensational nature of the case. Alara sat at the defense table in a conservative navy suit and a carefully cultivated expression of aggrieved innocence, looking every bit the respectable socialite rather than the calculating con artist she had proven to be. Her transformation was so complete that Leo had to do a double take to recognize the woman who had almost ruined his father. Damon, facing charges in a separate but related trial, would testify later as part of a plea bargain. His lawyer had negotiated reduced charges in exchange for his full cooperation, a fact that had added another layer of complexity to an already intricate case. When Leo's name was called, the courtroom fell silent. Rick squeezed his hand as Leo walked to the witness stand, his small figure dwarfed by the formality of the proceedings around him. The bailiff had to lower the microphone to his height, and the judge spoke in soft tones that seemed almost out of place in the austere setting. "Leo, do you understand that you are here to tell the truth about what you saw and heard?" asked Judge Helena Thorne kindly. "Yes, ma'am," Leo replied, his voice barely audible despite the microphone's amplification. Prosecutor Vance began with simple questions about Leo's background, establishing how he came to live with his father and the events leading up to the wedding. Leo's answers were clear and honest, describing his mother's passing, his father's loneliness, and Serafina's sudden appearance. "And what did you hear on the night of the 20th of October?" Vance continued. Leo's voice grew stronger as he recounted the conversation between Alara and Damon. She said they were going to get Dad's money, all of it, and then frame him for a financial crime. She said she was already married to Damon Blackwood and that her real name was Alara Vance. The specific details of the fraud scheme, gleaned from the documents Leo had found, struck the courtroom with a jolt. Alara's lawyer, an elegantly dressed man named Alistair Finch, objected frequently, arguing that a child's testimony was unreliable, but Judge Thorne overruled most objections, noting that Leo's account had been corroborated by physical evidence and financial records. The hardest moment came when Finch cross-examined Leo, trying to confuse him about dates and times, suggesting he might have misinterpreted what he heard. "Isn't it possible, Leo, that you were just a lonely boy, jealous of your father's new happiness, and perhaps you imagined some of these conversations?" he asked with a practiced kindness that held an undertone of condescension. "No, sir," Leo replied firmly. "I know what I heard. She was lying to my dad, and that was wrong." His simple moral clarity cut through the legal complexity like a knife. In that moment, everyone in the room, The jury, the spectators, even the defense team could see the absolute truth in his testimony. When Finch suggested that Leo might have fabricated the story for attention or sympathy, he looked directly at the lawyer with those wise, serious eyes. "I didn't want anyone to know I was listening," he said quietly. "I was scared of her, but I couldn't let her hurt my dad. My mom taught me that doing the right thing is more important than being safe." The impact of his words was visible across the room. Several jury members dabbed at their eyes, and even the court reporter paused in her transcription. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Alara Vance was found guilty on all counts: bigamy, multiple counts of fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole for 15 years. As Alara was led away in handcuffs, she maintained her defiant attitude to the end. "This isn't justice," she screamed. "This is persecution of a woman who simply saw an opportunity." But her words fell on deaf ears. Justice had been served not through revenge or hatred, but through the simple courage of a boy who chose to do the right thing, even when it was terrifying. Outside the courtroom, as media cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, Rick lifted Leo into his arms. "Are you okay, son?" he asked softly. Leo nodded, then smiled. The first truly carefree smile Rick had seen since this terrible ordeal began. "Can we go home now, Dad?" "Yes," Rick replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Let's go home." A year after that fateful morning in October, when a brave boy came forward to save his father, Rick Dawson's penthouse in London had transformed almost unrecognizably. Where once sterile display cases had been designed to impress business partners, now cozy, lived-in spaces invited life. The minimalist furniture that had dominated every room gave way to comfortable sofas perfect for reading bedtime stories. Leo's artwork covered the smart fridge, crayon drawings of stick figures labeled Dad and Leo that meant more to Rick than any corporate award he'd ever received. The formal dining room, once used only for entertaining clients, now hosted homework sessions, puzzle contests, and the occasional food fight that Maria pretended to disapprove of while secretly smiling. But perhaps the most dramatic change was in Rick himself. The driven executive who once worked 16-hour days now left the office promptly at 5 hours, prioritizing football practice over conference calls and bedtime stories over earnings reports. His chief of staff had initially worried about this dramatic shift in priorities, but Zenith Aerospace's performance had actually improved under his more balanced leadership. Turns out, he confided to his board members during a rare late-night strategy session, that having something more important than work makes you better at work, not worse. The legal proceedings finally concluded with a satisfying resolution. Alara received 25 years in federal prison, while Damon, who had cooperated fully with prosecutors, was sentenced to 8 years for his role in the conspiracy. Both would serve their time far from London, ensuring Leo's safety and peace of mind. More importantly, the formal adoption documentation for Leo, solidifying Rick as his sole legal guardian, had reached its happy conclusion. After months of home visits, background checks, and psychological evaluations, Judge Anya Sharma, the same detective who had spearheaded Alara's arrest, had signed the final documents, officially making Leo a permanent part of the Dawson family. "It's rare," the judge had commented during the quiet ceremony, "to see such a clear case of a child and a parent meant to be together." On this anniversary morning, exactly a year after Leo had shocked the wedding, Rick had planned a special celebration. He found Leo in the breakfast nook, carefully placing colorful sprinkles on heart-shaped pancakes Maria had prepared. "Today's our special day," Leo announced with 9-year-old solemnity. "The day I saved you, and you saved me." Rick smiled, marveling at Leo's ability to see their relationship as a mutual rescue rather than a one-sided charity. In truth, Leo was entirely right. Leo had saved Rick from far more than Alara's con. He had saved him from a life of solitary success, from relationships built on deception, from the empty victory of achieving everything except what truly mattered. "I have something for you," Rick said, pulling a small, wrapped box from behind his back. Leo's eyes widened with excitement as he carefully untied the ribbon, a skill he'd learned from Rick, who believed in savoring special moments rather than rushing through them. Inside was a small golden key attached to a delicate chain. "What's it for?" he asked, holding it up to catch the morning sun streaming through the kitchen windows. Come see, Rick replied mysteriously, leading him through the French doors to the private terrace. There, nestled in the corner of the vast rooftop garden where Leo once had practiced his sneaking, stood the most magnificent treehouse London had ever seen. Built of cedar and glass, it was large enough for two, but designed with 9-year-old sensibilities. Complete with a rope ladder, a telescope for spotting distant planes, and most importantly, a perfect view of the Grand Monarch, hotel where their story had begun. "It's ours!" Leo gasped, his voice filled with awe. "It's ours," Rick confirmed. "A place where we can always remember how we found each other, and all the places we can still go." They climbed up together. Leo scrambled with the fearless agility of childhood while Rick followed more carefully, still adjusting to the idea that his expensive suits were meant to be lived in, not preserved. The inside of the treehouse was everything a boy could imagine. Built-in benches with soft cushions, shelves for books and treasures, and windows placed to catch both sunrise and sunset. But the most special feature was visible through the main window. A clear view of the Grand Monarch Hotel, where a scared boy had hidden until courage demanded he reveal himself. "From here you can always see where we started," Rick explained, sitting beside Leo on the window seat. "But more importantly, you can see all the places we could go." Beyond the hotel, the view encompassed the sprawling London skyline, the River Thames with its ferries and barges, and the distant promise of the world beyond. It was a view of infinite possibilities, a perfect metaphor for the life they were building together. "Dad," Leo said suddenly, "do you think the elegant lady regrets what she did?" The question surprised Rick. Even after everything, Leo's capacity for empathy remained intact. A remarkable resilience that spoke as much to his mother's influence as to Leo's own essential goodness. "I don't know, son," Rick replied honestly, "but I hope that someday she finds a way to understand that hurting people never solves anything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city awaken around them. Distant plane engines hummed in the breeze. Seagulls called to each other from the rooftops, and somewhere in the distance, children's laughter drifted up from a nearby park. "I used to think," Rick said slowly, "that success meant building the biggest firm, making the most money, impressing the most people. I spent so many years focused on achieving things that I forgot to build a life worth living." Leo considered this with the seriousness he gave to all important conversations. "Mom used to say that things don't make you happy, people do. And doing the right thing makes you proud of yourself, even when no one else knows." The wisdom of those words struck Rick with renewed force. Leo's mother, though gone, had raised a son capable of risking everything to save his father. That kind of moral courage wasn't taught in business schools or corporate seminars. It was cultivated through love, example, and a deep understanding that character mattered more than comfort. "Your mom seems to have been an incredible woman," Ricky said softly. "Yeah, she was," Leo nodded. "But I think she would have liked you. You care about people. Your employees, Maria, me. Mom always said, that's how you know someone's heart is good." As the morning sun climbed higher, warming their special sanctuary, Rick reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, he was preparing to marry a woman who wanted to financially ruin and frame him. Today, he was planning a future with a son who had saved his life simply because it was the right thing to do. The irony was not lost on him. He had spent millions on security systems, background checks, and legal protections. But his true salvation had come from a 9-year-old boy, with nothing but courage and moral clarity. "Leo," Rick said finally, "there's something I want you to always remember. That day, you didn't just save my life. You gave me a reason to live it." Leo looked at him with those wise, earnest eyes that had seen too much sadness but somehow retained their capacity for joy. "Sometimes you have to lose something to gain something better," Leo said with the profound simplicity only children possess. Rick smiled, remembering how Leo had used almost those exact words a year ago. His empty penthouse had filled with laughter. His sterile success had transformed into meaningful purpose. His solitary achievement had become a shared adventure. Most remarkably, his carefully controlled life had been beautifully interrupted by spontaneity, wonder, and the daily chaos of raising a child who approached each day as a new opportunity for discovery. "Ready for our first official day as the Dawson family?" he asked, standing and offering his hand. Leo jumped up eagerly, already planning adventures in their new treehouse, already thinking about tomorrow's possibilities rather than yesterday's fears. "Ready," he declared with a smile that could power the entire city. And as they climbed down from their elevated sanctuary into the garden below, both of them understood that while their story had begun with danger and deception, it would continue, with love, laughter, and the unshakable bond between a man who'd learned that family was more valuable than fortune, and a little boy who'd discovered that courage could create its own kind of magic. The Grand Monarch Hotel stood unchanged in the morning light, a silent witness to the miracle that had unfolded within its walls. But everything else, their hearts, their home, their hopes for the future, had been transformed by the simple recognition that sometimes the most important family members arrive in the most unexpected ways. In the distance, church bells chimed the hour, and Richard Dawson and his son Leo headed inside for breakfast. Their shadows intertwining on the path like the lives that had found each other against all odds and chosen, despite every reason for fear to build something beautiful together. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and hit subscribe for more unforgettable, emotional, and viral true stories. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from?